Hello everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well, and I know I am, because I just got gifted a whole bunch of BattleTech blind boxes. Thank you very much, Rav. In case you didn't know, BattleTech recently got a new Kickstarter releasing a whole bunch of new boxes. But I feel like 4 is a little bit too much for today, so I'm just going to stick to the Battlefield Support Salvage box, which is tanks, and the new Mercenaries box, which is a whole bunch of new mechs. Anyway, let's see what we get. Ooh, and it looks like we got ourselves a Griffin. But not just any Griffin, we got ourselves a Griffin 2C, which is the clan upgrade of the Griffin after General Kerensky dipped from the Inner Sphere. Anyway, let's see what we get for the tanks. I gotta say, I really appreciate how good quality the new mech sculpts are. But anyway, out of this new box here are 2 heavy tanks. The first one you see before you here is called the Drillson Heavy Hover Tank, which I had never even heard of. And the second one, still in the box there, and the star of the show in my opinion, is called the Shrek PVC/Autocannon Carrier. And now this thing is my favorite new model that I've pulled from any of these boxes. It is huge, and it's got 3 giant barrels on it, so what more can a boy really ask for at the end of the day, eh? Anyway, given the fact that I drew 2 super heavies here, I'm thinking of painting them up to be the Lyran Commonwealth, the feudal German-coded, heavy metal-loving great house of the Inner Sphere. And as for the mech, I'm thinking House Kurita, simply because I want more of them. Anyway, without any further ado, let's get into the painting. BattleTech is primarily about mechs, so I figure I'd start with a Griffin. Following standard hobby procedures, I give it a coat of grey primer. As far as my Draconis Combine mechs go, I paint them usually with dark grey legs and a red torso. I did not know what this was lore-wise, but checking the unit color compendium, which is a really good place to get BattleTech paint schemes, by the way, it is identified as the Red Hunters Special Operations Group. Now, I did not know this when I started painting my House Kurita mechs, but my lance just got a whole lot more badass now, I guess. Speaking of red, I decided to give it just a straight coat of flat red and then hit it from the top with a slightly lighter one to add some more definition to the shapes there. I think that it turned out pretty nice, although the primer was a little bit chunky when it came out. I think it was just cold or something. Anyway, I am now beginning to just slap on some gray to the legs. Since I still had gray on my brush, I decided to pick out every single spot on the torso that was going to be not red in the future, places like the funny rabbit ear antennas and the missile launchers. Speaking of gray, I decided to dry brush the legs to add just a little bit more definition to them. With the Griffin in an arguably game-ready state, I decided to go the extra mile and try to do some edge highlights. I do this just with a slightly brighter red, accentuating key details and panel lines the higher up you go on the model. It is now time to tie the mech together using some of the Army Painter's Dark Tone, a very nice black wash that is actually similar in substance to Games Workshop's Null Oil there. The only difference being is that I can actually find this stuff in my hobby store. Since we're just sitting here watching a time-lapse, I'd figured I'd look into the Red Hunters a little bit more, and it turns out that they started out as just a group of personal guards for a Draconis Combine Duke, before eventually being upgraded to the DEST, which is the General Special Forces of the Draconis Combine, and according to Sarna.net, follow the ancient tenets of the ninja, which I think is really cool. Anyway, here I am beginning to paint up the cockpit. I'm trying to go for a polarized gold fighter jet type of look, so in order to do that I'm starting off with a layer of brown and then layering up lighter and lighter with yellows, eventually going to an off-white bone white, although this did take me several tries to get good. Well, it's by no means perfect, but I'm actually fairly proud of how this cockpit ended up turning out. Anyway, now that the mech is more or less done, it is time to move on to the tanks, and for this, I'm thinking of going for a classic Lyran Commonwealth, 2/3 blue, 1/3 white, split right down the middle, although the masking is going to be a little bit tricky. Same as before, I begin by priming the models grey. One thing that I really appreciate about the tanks is the fact that the turrets are actually removable. It definitely makes my job easier. I fear no man, but masking, it scares me. Especially when I'm doing it on a model this small. But anyway, to do this, I basically find a common panel line on the upper and lower bits of the tank, and then use that as a baseline to begin applying my masking tape. I make sure to squeeze extra hard along the edges in order for no paint to slip through when I eventually airbrush this, and then the next step after that is to rip off all the masking tape because you masked the wrong goddamn side. If you look closely, this is the moment when I actually realized my mistake and dropped the tank turret dramatically and emotionally. With the masking tape nice and redone on the correct side this time, it is time to finish all the other pieces and then hit them all with a nice coat of Vallejo's Air Steel Blue. Despite my shortcomings when it comes to masking, I gotta say that actually pulling off the tape and seeing the nice crisp edge it leaves is still one of the most satisfying feelings in modeling. Anyway, now that the colors are nice and applied, it is time to actually make them look a little bit less flat and boring. And to do this, I'm going to do a technique called dry brushing. So, all I do is just take a slightly lighter blue/gray and then apply it to their respective areas before hitting it all with a nice pure white to really make the edges pop. Ah, now that is a bit more like it. With the colors looking a little bit more defined and rendered, it is time to move on to the next step, which is to base coat everything that's not going to be white or blue. So I start off with the gun barrels and the tank tracks just using a nice neutral gray. And in order to add a little bit of visual interest, I use gunmetal to paint, you guessed it, the tank tracks. And then the guns. Anyway, the gunmetal on the tank tracks was kind of a bad idea, and I did it mostly for the bit, so I decided to go over it again with some NATO black. Or at least I would if the nozzle wasn't horrifically clogged, which a lot of my Vallejo things seem to be recently. I don't know what that's about. Now, from what I could tell after a quick round of Google searches, the Lyran Commonwealth doesn't really employ yellow on their military vehicles, but I think that yellow and blue look really nice, so I decided to paint up the pontoon that the Drillson floats upon, a nice orange-yellow gradient. And when it was done, I realized that it kind of looked like one of those United States World War II air rafts that they had on planes, and I thought that that was a very fun detail, although I hope that drowning isn't really on the forecast for this Drillson crew. I actually like the yellow so much, and I didn't really want the Shrek to be left out, so I decided to paint up the little headlights yellow as well. Finally, to finish off the models themselves, same as before, I'm hitting them with a coat of the Army Painter's Dark Tone. Despite the wash looking good, I still decided to brush up the edge highlights a little bit with some pure white to bring back some of that nice sharp contrast. And just like that, the Drillson and the Shrek are completed. However, we are not done yet because I have made a pact to myself that I'm actually going to try to base my models now. I got some nice new Vallejo paste, and I'm excited to try it out. For the bases, I'm not going to go too fancy here. I just like it to be a color other than the ugly primed mess that my bases usually are. So I'm going to take an old brush and basically just sloppily apply the texture paste to the base. I don't care if the paste gets a little bit onto the bottom of the mech's foot, as mud does tend to stick, but I try not to get it too much higher than that. With the paste applied, it is now time to start applying some base coats of color here. I'm going to try to go for a desert type of color, so I'd figure I'd start out with a darker brown and then dry brush up to more dusty and sandy colors. Since I'm painting up the brown of the base color, I also decide to rim the base with that. And a nice thing about this texture paste is that it leaves a really nice raised and bumpy texture, which catches a nice dry brush of a sandy tone. And in the end, I think it looks like a very convincing dried and cracked desert looking earth. And I'm quite proud of it, and I'm also quite happy that it's very easy to do, so I will definitely be doing this instead of leaving all of my stuff black. Once the paint had all dried and the bases were done of the other two vehicles, I called them good. Anyway, thank you all so much for tuning in and watching me paint some of the new mechs and tanks from the new BattleTech drop. I had a lot of fun painting these, and the sculpts were beautiful as always, and I gotta say that the blue and yellow of the Drillson is still gotta be one of my new favorite schemes, and I hope to try to replicate it again on an actual mech next time. Anyway, thank you all so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!